Welcome to the 61st lecture of the Otaru University of Commerce English Lecture Series. Today our speaker is Miss Tomoe Nishio. She's a PhD candidate from the University of Georgia. And her topic today is Intercultural Communication and English Language Learning. Please welcome Miss Tomoe Nishio.
Thank you very much for having me. Again, my name is Tomoe Nishio. I'm originally from Aichi Prefecture, and it's my first time to be in, not in Hokkaido, but in Otaru. This is my first visit, and I was surprised as I arrived today. It was very cold, but people told me it's not cold, right? It was colder before. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I study linguistics in the University of Georgia, and currently I teach Japanese at the same institution. And probably many of you know Nakatsugawa Sensei. Do you know him? Do you know Nakatsugawa Sensei? He and I were co-workers at the university that he studied abroad. When he was studying abroad, and since then we've been working together. And last year, we worked on a project where we asked our students to communicate interculturally. Okay? Yeah, so what we did was he asked his students, one of the, okay, let me show you what we did. This is what we did. It was an 8-week intercultural telecollaboration project between American college students of Japanese that I taught and Japanese college students of English from OUC. And it took place last fall. So we had this partnership last year. Well, it wasn't really my student that participated in this study, but I asked my coworker at the University of Georgia so that they can participate in this project. So the American students that participated were learning Japanese at the University of Georgia, and Nakatsugawa Sensei asked this course. Maybe some of you were in that course last fall, maybe not. Yeah, anyway, E153C students participated in this project. And what we did, we had 3 phases in the project. During the pre-discussion period, we had orientation, telling them what to expect. And we put students into groups. So 2 students from OUC, 2 students from UGA into a group, so that we have a virtual online group. And they were to have certain discussion on controversial topics. And during the discussion, in each group they had a discussion, and after that, each of the students had to submit a journal entry reflecting on what was going on. And after that, we had a small interview, but it wasn't, there was an interview. So what they did was, it wasn't really face-to-face conversation. Of course, we cannot really do that, considering the time difference and so on. It wasn't chat setting, or it wasn't Skyping or anything like that, but we used Google Groups. Are you familiar with Google Groups? No? It's like a discussion board type of application that Google provides, and we did asynchronous discussions online on controversial topics like gun control and TPP, which is a very hot topic in Japan, which is not really so discussed over there in the US. Anyway, and another topic was no foreigners allowed in Japan. They discussed these kind of things. And we use both languages, Japanese and English. We switched between languages depending on the topic. And And students had to read articles beforehand on the topic so that they can have fruitful discussions online. And we provided discussion questions beforehand so that they can think based on those questions. And this is the actual Google group discussion that took place. I hope it wasn't yours. This isn't yours. Yeah, it was like that. It was a Japanese discussion this time. But anyway, and this is what we did. And today I'm not going to talk about this project actually, but I'm going to talk more about what's needed for this type of interaction, online interaction. Nakatsugawa sensei and I are planning another intercultural project for this coming fall, and we're thinking of using Google Hangouts. Are you familiar with that application? It's like, well, we can say it's like Google Groups, but in addition to this type of communication, we can actually chat, and we can do the video chat as well. So maybe it's more intimidating for some of you, but it should be more fun. But before doing that, we have certain things that we need to keep in mind, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. So I'm going to do this. All right. Okay. So I said intercultural communication several times, but so intercultural. Between cultures. So when two cultures meet, there may be some good points and bad points. I don't know if you have that kind of experience in your life, but let's think about these questions. What are some of the positive aspects of communicating with people from other cultures? I see Japanese people here, and I think there are non-Japanese in this classroom, and maybe probably you have communicated with each other, right? And probably you have found some good points about communicating with them. But at the same time, you might experience some challenges in communication. And also think of some situations and contexts in which you need to communicate across cultures. Maybe in college or maybe outside of college, you might encounter this kind of context. And how would you define intercultural competence or maybe skills, intercultural skills? All right, and first of all, what is culture? How would you define culture? Can you think of some examples in your life? What's culture? So when you introduce Japanese culture to a foreigner, what would you first think of?
Samurai Fujiyama.
Samurai Fujiyama. Okay. Anything else? Maybe you can think of food, or maybe something to wear.
Sushi.
Yeah, sushi tempura, and kimono and things like that, right? Yeah. Those are cultural artifacts. Yes, that's cultural things. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. All right. And culture it's a human phenomenon coming to a group of people, okay? And it's transmitted by one generation and learned by the next through observation, roles, and guidelines. Okay? And it's about ways of thinking, feeling, and acting. And someone said culture is the software of the mind. You have the biological organ of brain, right? But what's in it is culturally defined. So, as you said, we can think of cultural artifacts like sushi, tempura, Fujiyama, what else did we say? Yeah, kimono and things like that. Yes, that's very easy to identify, but please know that there is a visible part of a culture and invisible, more invisible part of the culture. So what you can see is something like we just said. tempura, yeah, something to eat, something to wear, you know, those things are very easy to be identified. But there are other things that is very hard to identify, but it's still there. This is a cultural iceberg. Yeah. So what you can see is smaller than what you cannot really see under the sea. Okay. Yeah. And it's very important that you know that culture has something invisible. And thinking of your own culture. How many different cultures are you part of? How many different cultures are you part of? In case of me, I'm Japanese, and I'm from IG, so maybe I'm a part of IG culture. And I'm at University of Georgia, so I'm part of that culture as well. How about you? Maybe you have different cultures that you're a part of, right? Maybe many of you are Japanese, so you're part of Japanese culture. You're part of Hokkaido culture, which is different from mine, right? We're Japanese, but still, many of you are from Hokkaido, I believe, right? Yeah. So that, in that sense, you're different from me. And some of you may be from Sapporo. Some others may be from different part of Hokkaido. And yeah, you can name as many cultural groups as you can think of, actually. Yeah. And one of the biggest steps we can take towards effective cultural communication is to know your own cultures, and recognize the incredibly powerful impact it has on our thoughts, our communication style, verbal and nonverbal, and on our interpersonal relationships. Okay, and I would like to do hair work. Yeah, I don't know if you have seen, what's that? Lost in Translation. It's a movie from early 2000. Have you seen that movie? Maybe some of you have. Yeah, okay. So in this movie, at the very beginning of this movie, Bob Harris, that's the main character, he arrives in Tokyo and first interacts with Japanese citizens. So I would like you to describe the physical environment, the participants, and the types of interaction that he encounters. And what are typical Japanese things illustrated in the book. Be specific, and then talk about it with a partner. Okay. If you are Japanese, it might be very hard to identify what's typical Japanese, but try to be as objective as possible. Okay. What can be typical Japanese? Okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah, really good to see. Just take one, however it goes.
No, could you go back this way? Yeah, all the way back to, she said. Anybody know paper? I feel like I'm in the class.
Okay, ready? Okay, it's a count of one, okay? As he arrives, yeah, just identify what's Japanese, what's typical Japanese. with your partner. I will play this one more time silently, so while you're doing that, you can watch that again. Did you pick up anything? No? Nothing? Yeah, please discuss with your partner. What was something Japanese? Please talk to the people around you. How are we doing? Alright? Okay? Okay? Can anyone tell us what was typical Japanese? What did you notice? What did you notice?
The neon at the beginning. The neon.
Name cards? Yeah, business cards? Yeah, giving out on the business cards, yeah, and introducing themselves, okay? Anything else?
Traffic light.
Traffic lights?
Sign.
Yeah, traffic lights, and maybe different, yeah, and different signs, and things like that. Anything? Anything else? The lights? The lights, the colorful lights, yeah. Yeah, that's something you don't see in some other, in some other places. Maybe true. Anything else? Yeah, if you were Japanese, I think it was kind of difficult to identify. Wasn't that difficult? Japanese people? Because that's so normal to you, right? That's something you experience every day. So you don't really pay attention to that kind of things. Maybe giving a business card may not be a typical thing in other cultures. Okay? Yeah, and giving out welcome gift. All right. Okay. All right. Let's stop it right here. Okay. So, and in talking about our own cultures and cultures of others, there are some terms that is important to know. This may be too small, right? It's a little too small. Yeah. The first one is ethnocentrism. I don't know if you have heard, but it's the tendency of most people to judge other cultures by the standards of their own culture, which they believe to be superior. It may be natural for you to use your cultural standards. You have your common sense, right? As a Japanese person, as a Sapporo person, or, the standards of each culture. But when you use that to judge other cultures and think that your culture is superior by using your own standards, that's you're being ethnocentric. And another concept is stereotypes. Maybe you have heard, right? Stereotypes before. And it's a mistaken idea from an outsider's perspective about a culture different from your own. Okay? It's a mistaken, this is the important part, a mistaken idea from an outsider's perspective. Okay, when you see a culture from an outside and you make guesses about that culture, and if it was mistaken, that's called stereotypes. Another important thing is generalizations. It's a general idea of cultural norms, customs, and values developed from an insider's perspective. So it's kind of similar to stereotypes, but the critical difference is the insider's perspective. If you go into the culture and if you make generalizations of that culture, if you're already part of that culture, probably you could make generalizations of the people that you see in that group. But the important thing is that your idea of common sense may not be common to everyone. Okay, everybody has their own common sense. Each group of people has their own common sense. All right. And another thing, now I'm going to talk about some approach to cultural orientations. Okay, the first one is about identity, orientation to identity. Yep. So, individualism and collectivism. Have you heard the terms before? Maybe. Have you heard individual? Do you know individual, right? Each of you, right? Individualism. In individualistic culture, the focus is on individual achievement and individual rights. And the society of that culture is centered around that concept. And in that kind of culture, conflict and competition are expected. Oh, it's not that, it's always, it's full of conflict and competition, but it's likely that conflict and competition can happen. And in collectivistic culture, the focus is on the group. the loyalty to the group is valued over all else, and there is a strong obligation to the group. And maybe you can think of the concept like honor, shame, and face. Face is not your face, but it's more of men's type of thing. Okay. Right? And the society of a collectivistic culture is centered around gaining consensus within the group. So what people agree, that's the best. And 2/3 of the world culture, it said that 2/3 of the world culture of collectivism. What do you think the Japanese culture is? Is it individualistic or collectivistic? Collectivistic, yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, maybe too small, but you can find Japan right here, and the top is more collectivistic and bottom is more individualistic. Okay? We have US, Australia, UK, Canada, yeah, North American countries, and yeah, English-speaking countries. Yeah. Yep. All right. Okay. And when these two, cultures of different orientation to identity interact with each other, there may be a problem. A person from collectivistic culture can misperceive the cultural-based behavior of an individualistic culture as extremely insensitive and often as personally insulting, heartless, and rude. But on the other hand, a person from individualistic culture can misperceive the culture-based behavior of collectivists as being irresponsible and dishonest. I don't know if you have had that kind of experience. Maybe you have. Yeah. All right. And another aspect of culture is about context. High context culture versus low context culture. In high context culture, nonverbal communication provides the context for conversation. It is important to read between the lines. It's, in Japanese, bao yoni, kuki o yoni. Okay? And it is always the listener's responsibility to understand what's being said. Okay? That's called high context culture. And in low context culture, the low context culture prefers the message are explicitly spelled out, and more value is placed on verbal communication than on nonverbal communication. And the message, what's being said, is more important than the context. And the speaker is responsible for the communication. And what do you think the Japan is? Is it more high context, low context? High context, yes, it is. According to this, it's the most high contextual culture. Yeah, Japan, China is more high context. And Switzerland, yeah, says Switzerland is low context culture. Yes, and you can see some examples in language maybe. In Japanese, I teach Japanese at UGA. Maybe a typical sentence that my students make. あなたは西尾先生ですか? あなたは西尾先生ですか? It's okay, right? It's grammatical. Isn't that grammatical, Japanese people? Yes, but is it appropriate to ask あなたは西尾先生ですか? To a teacher? Can you ask that? No reaction. I would say no. As a Japanese speaker, I would say あなたは西尾先生ですか? That's kind of rude, don't you think? Right? In Japanese, maybe you wouldn't say あなたは part. Maybe you would say 西尾先生ですか? That's okay, right? あなたは西尾先生ですか? 西尾先生ですか? Maybe saying あなた is kind of inappropriate in some situations. And in Japanese, you can skip subjects in many cases, and you can skip objects if it's understood, right? Japanese sentences can be very short because you can skip a lot of things. But in English, when you say, are you Professor Nishio, that's okay, and that's grammatical and that's appropriate if you don't know if that person that you're talking to is Professor Nishio. Right. So, yeah. So the Japanese culture can depend on the context, and you can get a lot of things out of the language. But in English, you cannot really do that. Well, sometimes gets you that in German. Right? Okay. And what's next? And what might happen when a person from high context culture and a person from low context cultures interact with each other? A person from a low context culture can misperceive the culture-based behavior of a person from high context culture like us, like Japanese people, as overly sensitive, extremely formal, and very picky about details. But on the other hand, the person from high context culture like us, the Japanese, can misperceive the culture-based behavior of people from low context cultures as insensitive, disrespectful, uncaring, and extremely easygoing about protocol and etiquette. In other words, they may think that they are rude. Okay. And another thing is about direct or indirect communication. Maybe you have heard that Japanese people are more indirect. Do you agree? Japanese people are more indirect. I see some people nodding. Yeah. Maybe non-Japanese people nod. But the Japanese people are indirect. Yes. Yeah. According to this, Japan is the most indirect culture. And Germany, Netherlands, Eastern Europe, they're more direct in communication. Right. So, yeah, if a person from direct communications, a person with direct communication style and another person with indirect communication style meet, then again, there may be some challenges, in that kind of communication. So if, when those two people meet, the direct person might think this indirect person is kind of, this direct person may not have a clear idea of what this indirect person is saying. And the other way is the more indirect person might think that this direct person is, too explicit. Too explicit. Or maybe too unsophisticated, because that person has to say every single thing. Okay? And in communication, the most traditional way of communication is verbal messages. And in communicating, please know that what's not said can be very important. Okay? So this is another iceberg. This is a communication iceberg. On the surface, you have what comes out of the speaker's mouth. So what's said is a small part of the huge iceberg. So what's not said may include gestures and body language and silence, use of silence. How tolerant are you for the silence? And maybe about interpersonal space. In some culture, they would like to have more space than your culture does. And also turn taken may be important. Do you wait until other person is done talking, or can you just interrupt that person? That may be culturally different. Okay. And another pair work from the same movie. Okay. This paper has this handout has the instruction. Pair work 2. Charlotte has hurt her toe, and it is now bruised so badly that Bob insists that she must visit a local hospital to have it checked. And what type of communication difficulties do they experience in the hospital, at the front desk, and in the waiting room? What specific strategies were used to bridge their language and culture gaps? Okay. Watch this. Alright. Okay. Yeah. Please now talk to someone next to you. Yeah. What type of communication difficulties do they experience?
相手分かってようが分かってないから、権利的なものになります。日本語の勉強です。今のケースだったら、分かりやすく教えすればいい。Yes.
Just realized.
See you next week. ウェイティングルームとかで待合室とかでさ、あの場面。
文で言わない。単語言えば分かる。分かんない。
互い通じないじゃん。片方にあんまりできないし、片方にできないし。その時なんか、どうこの中としてだから、その時に話しかけたんだけど、最後は笑ってたけど、だから、あれが最後のハイコンテクスト。言葉じゃない理解の説明するの難しかったです。なんか簡単な単語って真似して難しかったです。あとはだからお医者さんも説明してるんだけど、見せてるんだけど、説明してるんだけど、言葉じゃなくてもああやってクレツコスっていう言葉は何だっていうのかそうやってひび入ってる。それもコミュニケーション。More specific strategies are used to communicate and verbal communication.
Anyone, what kind of communication difficulties? Or are they communicating well? It's a movie, so it looks like, you know, they understood each other somehow, but what was going on? Did Bob and Charlotte, did they understand what's been said? Not really, right? Not really. But how did they figure out what to do? Maybe they guessed. Maybe they guessed. Yeah, but at least there is something that led them to the waiting room, maybe. Yeah. What was going on? Yeah, so he used, you know, he passed some documentation to fill out, or some forms to fill out, so that they understand, you know, they kind of get what's to do, what to do. And he did this, right, over there, type of gesture, yeah, that helped them, you know, somehow it helped Bob to look at that direction, look into that direction, and find the waiting room, yeah. And how about in the waiting room? That was funny, right? The old lady. It wasn't an old lady, right? It's not old guy. Old lady. Did you get what she was trying to say, so, appa. What do you think what she meant? Any guesses? I thought she was talking about airplanes. I don't know. I could be wrong. Any other guesses? What she was trying to say? How long back? Yeah. Anyway. But she definitely uses gesture, right? Nannen. How many years? Nannen. Counting down. Yeah. And Bob just looks into her eyes to show that he doesn't understand her, right? That kind of eye movement can be part of the gesture, right? I don't know what she, we don't know what she means, but still she uses gesture to somehow get through context. She uses body language, and Bob as well imitates her. Yeah. We don't know if the communication went well, but somehow got the communication going. So that's important. Okay. All right. And next thing is another pair work, which is on the other side of your handout. Strategy for effective intercultural communication. Probably you have communicated with people from other cultures, right? I hope. If not, you can use your imagination at the maximum. But in pairs, I would like you to list some strategies for effective intercultural communication. For example, use gestures or pay attention to gestures. And can you think of other strategies to communicate with someone from other culture? What have you done, or what do you think is necessary? All right. It's kind of broad topic, but let's discuss this. Yeah, please work with your partner and list out some of the strategies. English.
ャーだからカルチャーと触るっていうのは大事だと思
Okay. All right. Now, I want to hear your opinions. So I would call on each group. Okay. So be ready to answer something. Okay. Do you need some more time? Are you ready to share your opinion? Any volunteers at this point? Maybe you guys? Yeah?
Alcohol.
Okay. Huh? Alcohol. Okay. Alcohol. How do you use alcohol? To drink. Yeah, to drink together. Yeah. That may be good.
君の意見の方がいい。言ってみる。
Yeah, especially in Japan, drinking is an important part of for communication. But know that, I mean, please keep in mind that alcohol may not help other, people of other cultures. Sometimes, some people don't drink, right? In other cultures, but in Japan, drinking with, people is a huge part. But it may not be the case. Okay, but yeah, as long as you're in Japan. Alcohol, yeah, that might work. Okay? Anything else? Go ahead.
Smile makes communication better.
Okay. Smile makes communication better. Do you agree? Yeah. And
Play together.
play together. Hang out together. Play together. Okay.
And
Hold on.
high touch.
High five.
High touch. Touch each other.
Touch each other.
What do you mean to you?
Okay.
High five. High five.
High five. Right? High five. Yeah, high five. Do you do high five? High five. In Japanese, you say high touch, right? High touch. High five. Yeah? That's the communication. Okay? Smile and high five. Yeah? All right. And what else? What else? Okay? Over here, do you have anything?
Yes, I do.
Yes, they do. Speak slowly, okay? Speak slowly, okay? And that was it? And what do you have? Was that the same?
Try to figure out what other countries' person is, even if he speaks long Japanese language.
Okay? Could you say it again?
Try to figure out what other countries' person means,
Okay.
even if he speaks wrong Japanese.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Try to understand what the person says, person means, even if the language used is wrong. Okay. I mean, not wrong, but inappropriate. Yeah. Try to understand what he means. Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's important. And what else?
Willingness to listen.
Willingness to listen. Okay. Yeah. Patience and willingness to listen. Yeah. To understand. Anything else? All right. People in the back. Anyone? The one with glasses. In the back row. Looking down. On the desk. I'm talking to you. I'm talking to you. You. Do you have anything? Body language, yes? What about body language? Use body language? Yes, okay. Yeah, use body language, yes, that's important. And pay attention to other people's body language, because that might be different from yours. Yeah. And how about people in the back over here? Do you have anything? Girls? Do you have anything? You. Do you have anything? Yes. Gesture, okay. Anything else did you come up with? No? Gesture does it all? Gesture is everything? Is that enough? Anything else?
Showing pictures.
Showing pictures? Showing pictures and?
To explain something.
To explain something, yeah. Yeah, that helps a lot. Yeah.
To write.
To write down what you mean. Yeah. That's important too. Yeah. Okay. And here I have some examples of strategies. Okay? Okay. So number one says treat all the people you communicate with as individuals. Okay? They are individual people, right? So please treat them as a person. Okay, as a person. Not as a representative of that country. Okay? That's one person that you're talking to. And number two is respect personal names. Please use their names. Use other people's names. Okay? And three, turn fear into curiosity. You may be afraid of communicating with people from different cultures because of the difference, maybe. Maybe because of the English language, or maybe other languages that you're using. But, getting to know the people with other cultures, you can learn a lot of things. So please turn fear into curiosity. And number 4, avoid making generalizations or maybe stereotypes. Please avoid making stereotypes. Please try to know from an insider's perspective. And number 5, try to be open to new information. Instead of judging it based on your cultural standard, please be open to new information. And number 6 is don't assume. Please don't assume. Okay? You might want to ask a lot of questions, okay? But yeah, it's better than assuming and to make generalizations or stereotypes. And number 7 is don't treat others unfairly. Yeah. Yeah. And number 8, notice the economic and social dividing lines. What you have in Japan in your social class may not be available or may be more than available in other cultures. Sorry. Just doing this. All right, and number 9, use acceptable terms for cultural groups. Okay, like Indians, like American Indians. We don't really use American Indians for Native Americans in the U.S. So something like that. And avoid making judgments. Yeah, it's related to what's said before. And number 11 may be important and easy to understand and very important. Laugh with people, not at them. Okay, laugh at them, but don't laugh at them. And 12, expect to have to explain cultural unwritten rules. We do have a lot of unwritten rules, right? As Japanese person, Japanese community has a lot of unwritten rules. Sometimes you may have to explain that to someone who doesn't know that. And 13 is find out how disagreements are handled in other person's culture. Okay? Yeah, showing disagreement can be very different and can be sometimes dangerous. Not dangerous, but critically different. So some misunderstanding might occur because of that. All right, and number 14 is pay attention to gestures. That's the example I said. And 15, adjust your interpersonal space requirements. Yeah, in some cultures, there are interpersonal spaces closer, but in some others, it's not. And lastly, be very careful about touching in any way. Don't just touch people. Sometimes, in Japan, teachers pat students' shoulders, right? Hey, good job, or try harder next time. That's okay, but in some cultures, that may not be appropriate. So be careful. All right, and lastly, so in learning English, maybe you're learning English, or maybe you're learning Japanese, right? And learning a language is much more than learning the language itself, but you are learning other things too, like cultural values, communication strategies, and probably material culture as well, like Fujiyama, kimono, that kind of thing as well. That's the easiest to experience, but cultural values, communication strategies, that's more hidden. That's more unsaid type of thing, so pay attention to those. And keep in mind that there are various English speakers from different cultural backgrounds, including yourself and myself. Speaking English does not make us the same in terms of ways of thinking and behaving, right? I'm speaking English, but my way of thinking may be different from American people, may be different from Australian people. Well, it should be different. So, speaking English doesn't make us the same, the equal. So please respect the difference and be ready, be open to those differences. Okay, I think that's all I have to say, and thank you very much.
Thank you.